Good morning. Happy Sunday. I hope it's wonderful wherever you are in the world and whatever time of day it is for you. I know a lot of people tune in on a Saturday night from America. So I hope you're having a lovely weekend wherever you are. I hope you've got your cuppa. I have my cuppa. Today I want to talk about a shock that happened for me when I was researching. And this is something I talk about quite often. And this is like one of the first things that I do with clients as well, because this is what I do for myself. All right. So I don't do anything with clients, or I don't tell you anything pretty much that I haven't done for myself. And the thing that this involves is usually something that people kind of just let go and think, oh, no, I don't need to do any of that. And it's researching yourself. Now, if you don't know your own body and your own self, doctors can only help you kind of this much. And here's the thing. You've got to be more interested in your own health than anybody else in the planet. You have to be. To get anywhere, to feel better, to improve your life, to improve your health, your well-being, your emotional state, all of that, it's up to you, sadly. So one of the first things I do with clients and for myself, and I do this regularly, is I take inventory of my body. So for me to look up something and to figure something out about myself or whatever I'm going through, or, the lipedema or the thyroid or whatever it is I'm doing, I first have to know what I'm starting with. And one of the big things that I have to know there is my family history. And you know how you go to the doctor and your doctor will go, oh, is there any history of breast cancer? Is there any history of this, that, and the other? Many people don't know the full history of their family's medical situation. And sometimes you can't find that out. Sometimes it's really hard to find that information out, especially if you've been adopted, fostered, that kind of thing. So if you can find it out, it's really, really important. Now, I have most of my history, and there are times that I still find out something new that mum may have forgotten to tell me, or I've forgotten she told me in the past, things like that. But anytime that I'm starting from scratch or I'm learning about something new, I go back to the family history to see what's possibly in my genetics. Now, last week, when I was researching the last video that dropped on Friday, the 8 treatments that all the lipedema pages pretty much recommend, I was watching video upon video in the Fat Resources Society and Lipedema Simplified and those sorts of places. They're pretty dry videos because they're usually seminars and conferences that have been filmed. But when I want to know something about myself and learn, that's how I do it. I just sit through all these endless lectures and things like that from doctors to find out stuff about myself. Now, here's what happened. I was watching one of them, and it was from Karen Herbst. So if you're new to the lipedema world, Karen Herbst is like a heavy hitter in the world, and she researches this. She works in this field. It's kind of her bread and butter in so much as it's what she does every day. So she was doing a lecture at a symposium or something for the Fat Resources Society, and I've got it on this screen because it's too hard to remember. So she was talking about 4 major fat disorders that are kind of linked. So lipedema, but it was also lipedema, lymphedema, lipolymphedema, Durkin's disease, but she also talked about familial multiple lipomatosis. So that's non-painful lipomas. So lipomas are the big fat pads that get out of control, or the fat nodules that get out of control. That's what lipomas are. And multiple symmetric lipomatosis, or also called Madelung's disease. And that's lipomas primarily on the top half of the body. All right. So here's where it got interesting. And I was like, wait, what? Like, it was insane because I know not only my family medical history, I know my husband's family medical history, which he's just not interested in, right? I do that kind of thing from his mother. The multiple symmetric lipomatosis, the lipomas primarily on the upper body, are linked to lipedema. Primarily, this occurs in men. Now, my husband had a lipoma on his back for 20 years, just the one, which he had cut out last year. And it's also connected, this situation, to Charcot-Marie Tooth syndrome. It's a French named thing after 3 scientists. His grandfather had that. Now, had I not known his medical history, that would have passed me by. So this situation can happen more in men than women. So it's all, even though it's linked, and as far as we know right now, lipedema is primarily women. They haven't discounted men, but there's so few that they've come across that they think that. But this tells me that for him, we need to also keep an eye on lymphatics and all the things that I do for him. Had I not known the family history, had I not taken that inventory of him as well as myself, that would never have popped up, and therefore I would not have known that. Well, moving forward, so one of the ladies that she used, that Dr. Herbst used as a example, had this, and she actually reversed it in a year following a really strict keto diet, and something else. I can't remember what the other thing was. And she had a lot of lipomas. My husband had the one, right? So, but it just shows you, you need to know your medical history. You need to know your own medical history of what's happened to you as much as you can from the moment you were born. How were you conceived? Were you breastfed? Were you born via cesarean? Were you naturally? All of those things, right through to what's happened in your family that you may have a genetic weakness in that area. And things can kind of, there are things that you can then connect the dots and go, what's the common denominator here? Okay, so I like to look at things like, okay, so I've got thyroid disease, I've got Hashimoto's, I've got lipedema. What's the common denominator there? It's hormones. Okay, so hormones I have to be very, very careful of. That's just a very general way of looking at it. If you had diabetes type 1 and Hashimoto's and rheumatoid arthritis, the common denominator there is the immune system. So then you'd need to look at your immune system and look at, are there common epigenetic, gene mutations across those things that perhaps leads you to needing to remove a certain thing from your diet so that those genes that's common across those 3 things stay turned off, right? So it sounds confusing, but it's actually really not. It's about knowing your own history. What have you dealt with in your life? Okay, and sometimes that's a long way to go back, right? I still go back to sometimes in my life, and I'm nearly 55, so it doesn't matter how old you are. Knowing as much as you can about your medical history, and then going back and trying to find out as much as you can about the history in your family, what your forebears died of, what diseases were in the family, talk to people, talk to as many people as you can in the family to try and get a gist of what's going on. Because like this thing that I found for my husband, researching myself, had I not known his history, would not even thought of it, which means that as he aged, he may have had the same problems as his grandfather, which, he had a few. Whereas now we know if he sticks to a mostly keto lifestyle for the most part, which is where he's at for the most part now, then we can avoid that being switched on or made worse or progressing down that road. It's the same for me. It's the same for everyone. When I studied naturopathy, I literally pinned everything about. I didn't know I had lipedema at this point, so I went to school. I went back to college at 40, became a naturopath, a clinical nutritionist, and herbalist. But I pinned everything I learned to the thyroid, right? So I was like, oh, yeah, but what's this got to do with me? What's this got to do with the thyroid? How does this impact me? It didn't matter whether we were studying the cardiovascular system or the integumentary system, so your skin. It didn't matter. I just pinned everything back to the thyroid. So when we're learning about ourselves, and I highly recommend we learn about ourselves, we do not have to be doctors. We do not have to be scholars to research and find information about our own diseases and our own issues. We just need to be interested in our own health. That is it, right? So knowing what you're dealing with, you don't have to have it on a piece of paper beside you every time you watch a video. But if you've got a rough thing in your head of knowing what potentially is in your gene pool, then anything you watch, you will automatically connect the dots and go, oh, hang on a sec. My mum had that, or my dad had that, or my grandparent had that. Okay, so I think it's just one of those things that not enough people do, is take inventory on themselves, because it's like, oh, that's just too boring. But it is literally, and look, I've run groups and I have a big workbook, and the first thing you do in the workbook is take inventory on yourself and take inventory of what's in your family. It's the first thing your doctors ask you. It's the first thing that gets asked in more in-depth naturopaths. You may not cover that, but certainly doctors, don't they always ask, is this in your family? Is that in your family? And there's a reason they ask that. So we always seem to get to these places and go, oh yeah. So this is like the first step in taking charge of your health, no matter whether you think you can reverse it or whether you can't reverse it. It doesn't matter. If you don't know these things about yourself, if you're not in charge and feel in control of knowing what's in your past and what's in your family's past, and knowing what you're dealing with now, often I'll sit with clients and they'll be like, because we forget things, right? All the time. If we're not experiencing something in the moment of talking to somebody, we forget we have it going on until the next time it pops up. We just have this, I suppose it's a pain thing that as humans, we're meant to forget the pain. That's why women have more than one baby. We're designed to forget that. But if we don't keep a diary, if you followed me long enough, you'll know I'm a big proponent of keeping a diary. And that diary may just be a small version of your weekly thing. It could be a different notebook, and just, you can get those small ones, which has got a little tab for each day of the year. If you're on any medication, write down what medication you're taking at that time. What symptoms are you experiencing at the moment? Because it's amazing how much, when you learn something later down the track, you go back and go, hang on a sec, what was happening around that time that I was going through grief, or I was going through pregnancy or menopause or any of those things? What was happening for me at that time? It's the only way you connect the dots is to keep data on yourself, like you're your job, because you are. I hate to tell you this, you are your job. You are your only purpose, nobody else is going to be as interested and as vested in you being the healthiest, happiest version of yourself that you are. All right. So unless you've got a wife like me who's as interested in him being as healthy and happy as me, then, which is unusual, I use him as a research module just as much as anything, because it's fascinating how different people, different stress loads, different ways of thinking, different upbringings can change your genetics and change how things show up for you health-wise, right? So that is just, I talk about this constantly. Nobody seems to do it, and that's okay. It's confronting. It's confronting to look at yourself and go, oh, what are the things that are happening for me, because you're kind of looking at the things that you don't like about yourself, because most of the ill health is something we don't like about ourselves. And it feels like there's too much of that going on in our life, so we tend to just ignore it. And that's why in a lot of situations we try to put it on our doctors to just, you sort it out, you figure it out. But the doctors won't connect the dots, right? They won't sit there going, oh, hang on a sec. And because we've got this mentality, or we've got this society where, if we've got a liver problem, we go to the liver doctor, the liver specialist. If we've got a digestive problem, we go to the digestive, the gut person. We go to these separate doctors. So there's nobody sitting there going, oh, look, you've got this, and this. The common denominator is hormones here for you. So your endocrine system needs to be your priority of getting your endocrine system working properly. Now, that's no small feat. That's like that, but that is sometimes you need that rudimentary, very simple overview of, oh, hang on a sec, I've got 3 autoimmune diseases. I need to calm my immune system down, right? So sometimes you just need that big picture view, but you don't have that unless you're willing to look at yourself, okay? And unless you're willing to take on the research of you, rather than handing that over to the specialist, to the doctor, to the whoever that specializes in that one little separate thing, who's not going to connect the dots with all other things. Because what if that one thing is something that you're putting on your skin every day? What if that one thing is something that you're eating every day that could be very healthy? It could be perfectly healthy. But that's the common denominator for flipping the switch on that gene mutation that's common in each category that you've got going on. I've actually started looking a lot closer since watching all those videos for my last video of the gene mutations that are involved. And they don't exactly know the gene mutation for lipedema yet, but they're looking at about 6 different ones. So it would be really interesting then to look at the gene mutations that are possibly out there for thyroid disease. I haven't come across that now that I think about it, but that's something that now I'll put in my list of going, oh, well, that's my other major issue, is the gene mutate, is the thyroid disease. So what's the common denominator besides hormones? Is there a gene mutation that has a commonality between the two? Or is it just totally separate things, So they haven't discovered, even though the version of thyroid disease I've got is autoimmune disease, they haven't linked lipedema to the immune system that I'm aware of, or that I have researched so far. I could be wrong. If you know differently, let me know. But this is why you research yourself. This is why, and this is how you take control of your own health. Okay, if you're not taking control of your own health and guiding the doctors, I've done this many times where I've gone into a doctor with a list of, oh, can you just run these tests for me? Doctors now, they've got such a little amount of time, and if you've got a good reason for it, you say, oh, I've had weight loss surgery, I've got thyroid disease, these are the ones that I get every year. They don't think anything of it. If you've got a very sane reason for why you're wanting to run these tests, generally it's just very easy for them to go, oh, yeah, and they write it out. Is there anything else you need? You've been there. It's kind of like, it's like a shopping list. You take into the doctor what you need and what you want, and the doctor's like, we'll decide whether or not you can have it. And it's very sanitary like that, isn't it? So if you can go in forearmed with your issues and understand why, if you can give a good reason why you want these tests done, there's usually, I've not come up with any doctor and I've gone to many up here, because up here you don't have sort of the same doctor, it's who you can get in with. But if you've got a very, logical reason that you've researched as to why you want a particular test, or you want to track something, or you want to have an ultrasound on your carotid arteries to check for plaque, if you've got a good reason that makes sense to the doctor, then generally they do not argue with it. They're all too happy that somebody knows what they want. They can write it out. They've got nobody above them that they know of that's going to say to them, no, that costs too much money running the test, so because don't forget, the doctors have somebody above them it's a business. Like everything, it's a business. So as long as you've got a good reason and you've got the genetics and, look, I want to have this test because my mum had this issue and I've got a few things that may interconnect, so I just want to double check it, prevent it, all that sort of thing. But unless you know your family history, unless you know all these sorts of things about yourself and taking inventory of yourself, then you just go into the doctor like usual and go, just testing my thyroid again. I don't know, whatever you think. Like, there's no control there. That does not make you feel good about your own health and how you're moving forward. And I don't care where your health is at. I don't care whether you feel like there's no turning back for you and, I've let myself go or whatever. It doesn't matter. Tomorrow can always be better. It's always one more thing. It's just one baby step at a time. And what you're reaching for is feeling slightly better, whether it's physically, mentally, or emotionally. They're the three legs of the stool. If you're not feeling better each day in one of those areas, then you are stuck. Then you are not helping yourself in any way. But the only way that you make gains and you move forward in each of those areas is to do it yourself. That's it. And I know we always want somebody else to do it for us, to fix it for us, to change it for us. Give me the pill, give me the treatment, give me if I just have surgery, if I just have this. All of those things require hard work and stress and things from you anyway. I know, having gastric sleeve surgery, I was very much in that space of, what are people going to say? They're going to think I took the easy way out. Let me tell you, there was nothing easy about that surgery and the journey that I went on afterwards. I'm in a great space now and I do not regret it for a second. It's changed my life. But any change you make for you is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a journey. But only you can do that, and that's the only way out of chronic disease of any kind. That is it. So I'm going to get off my soapbox and go and have a walk, because that's something we do every day. And yesterday I walked up a hill that I don't know if you've seen any of my shorts, that I used to be able to just make it to the top. I'd have to stop many times to get to the top of that hill. And yesterday I got up it in one go. We haven't been up it in years, because it was and I did a 6 kilometre walk and the hill, right? One better, right? We normally do a 5 or a 6K walk anyway, and that was just that one thing better. So every day is about just doing one thing better than you did yesterday. That is it, right? And then it compounds on each other and you get better and better and better. That's how athletes work. Let's just do 1 second quicker than we did yesterday. We have to do those things for ourselves and for our health and for our happiness, because we all want to have happiness. We all want to live a life of peace and joy and life is good. So, but unfortunately, when you are in chronic disease and you're in the throes of this sort of thing, life doesn't feel good. So again, I'll get off my soapbox. Happy Sunday. I'm off for our walk this morning, and I hope you're all well. And I will see you all next Sunday. Bye.